Greetings to all of you, my dear sisters and brothers, and my dear friends, and all are welcome to a new broadcasting, Prayer, Our Deepest Longing, a study and meditation about prayer. This is your pastor, Yeti. So we start a new study, meditation about prayer. Spirituality is as real as science, but that is not easy to understand or believe. We live in a world where what is real has been reduced to what is physical, to what can be empirically measured, seen, touched, tasted, and smelled. Excuse me. We live in a world that is, for the most part, spiritually tone deaf, where all the goods are in the store window, digitized or reduced to a flat screen. And so, prayer is a struggle. So are a lot of other things. When the surface is all there is, it is hard to be enchained by anything, to see depth, to be deeply touched by poetry, faith, and love. But these are what we long for: depth, poetry, faith, and love. Indeed, we are made for love. We are made for intimacy with each other and with God. We can really say, "You have made us for yourself, Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." But the deep meaning of our longing is not always so obvious. Today, most of us do not see our restless longing as pushing us toward the infinite. We have trivialized and tamed our longing, instead of longing for the transcendent. We anesthetize and distract ourselves by focusing our desires on the good life, on sex, on money, on success, and on whatever else we think everybody has. There's nothing inherently bad about these things, but if we define our deepest longings as direct toward these things in themselves, we end up mostly disappointed and empty. Our disquiet persists, and we remain restless and tired, drained of energy, rather than in a place of solitude where our very striving gifts use energy. Ultimately, our restless aging in a yearning for God. We need to connect with God. We need prayer. We know this. But in our more reflected moments and in our more desperate moments, it is then that we feel our need for prayer and try to go to that deep place. But given our lack of trust and our lack of practice, we struggle to get there. We do not know how to pray or how to sustain ourselves in prayer. Whether you struggle to even believe in prayer, or a beginner in prayer, or are more advanced in prayer, my hope is that these reflections will encourage you in your practice of prayer. There is no bad way to pray, and there is no one starting point for prayer. All the great spiritual masters offer only one non-negotiable rule. You have to show up for prayer, and you have to show up regularly. Everything else is negotiable and respects your unique circumstances. These reflections are intended to help you get beyond some of our habitual struggles with prayer, so that it no longer feels as though you are simply doing some drab duty, wasting precious time, talking to a wall, entertaining yet another daydream, or simply rehashing your heartache and headaches. The reflections will try to offer a healthy combination of consolation. Everyone struggles with prayer and challenge. We all need to ground ourselves more deeply through prayer. Mostly, though, they will try to help open you so that in the most intimate part of yourself, you can more clearly hear God and others say, "I love you." For only that can make us whole. There is a beautiful text in the Gospels that captures in a stark metaphor our need for prayer. One morning, after Simon, Peter, James, and John have toiled all night and caught nothing, no fish, only their own emptiness, Jesus comes to them and invites them to go out to a deeper waters, to put out into the deep. They do, and they catch so many fish their boat begins to sink. You can read this story in Luke 5, verses 1 to 7. These reflections on prayer are an invitation that echoes that invitation from Jesus. When we are catching nothing but our own emptiness, it is time to put out into the deep. So come with me in the first chapter of our new study and reflection, Struggling in Prayer, Too Busy to Bow Down. We are not, by choice or ideology, a culture set against solitude, interiority, and prayer. Nor are we, in my opinion, more malicious, pagan, or afraid of interiority than past ages. Where we differ from the past is not so much in badness as in busyness. Most days we don't pray simply because we don't quite get around to it. Perhaps the best metaphor to describe our hurried and distracted lives is that of a car wash. When you pull up to a car wash, you are instructed to leave your motor running, to take your hands off the steering wheel, and to keep your foot off the brake. The idea is that the machine itself will suck you through. For most of us, that's just what our typical day does to us. It sucks us through. We have smartphones and radios that stimulate us before we are fully awake. Many of us are texting friends, checking Facebook and emails, watching the news, or listening to music or talk radio before we even shower or eat breakfast. The drive to work follows that same pattern, stimulated and preoccupied. We listen to the radio, talk on our cell phones, and plan the day's agenda. We return home to television, conversation, activities, and preoccupations of all kinds. Eventually, we go to bed, but perhaps we read or watch a bit more TV. Finally, we fall asleep. When, in all of this, did we take time to think, to pray, to wonder, to be restful, to be grateful for life, for love, for health, for God? The day just sucked us through. Moreover, prayer is not easy because we are greedy for experience. The spiritual writer Henry Nouwen put this well. "I want to pray," he once said, "but I also don't want to miss out on anything. Television, movies, socializing with friends, drinking in the world. because we don't want to miss out on any experience. Prayer is truly a discipline. When we sit or kneel in prayer, our natural craving for experience feels starved and begins to protest. Ironically, most of us crave solitude as our lives grows more pressured, as we grow more tired, and as we begin to talk more about burnout. We fantasize about solitude. We imagine it is as a peaceful, quiet place where we are walking by a lake, watching a sunset, or smoking a pipe in a rocker by the fireplace. But even here, many times, we make solitude yet another activity, something we do. Solitude, however, is a form of awareness. It's a way of being present and perceptive within all of life. It's having a dimension of reflectiveness in our daily lives that brings with it a sense of gratitude, appreciation, peacefulness, enjoyment, and prayer. It's the sense within ordinary life that life is precious, sacred, and enough. How do we foster solitude? How do we get the handle on life so it doesn't just suck us through? How do we begin to lay a foundation for prayer in our lives? The first step is to put out into the deep. By remaining quietly in God's presence in solitude and silence in prayer. If it is just your first time doing this, set aside 15 minutes for prayer. In time, you might be able to manage 30 minutes. Remember, your heart is made to rest in God. The kind of prayer that leads to profound transformation. The kind of prayer that will not leave you empty-handed. Your heart is made to rest in God. We're taking another level, struggling with boredom. Prayer has a huge ebb and flow. When we try to pray, sometimes we walk on water and sometimes we sink like a stone. And sometimes we have a deep sense of God's reality and sometimes we can't even imagine that God exists. Sometimes we have deep feelings about God's goodness and love, and sometimes we feel only boredom and distraction. Sometimes our eyes fill with tears and we wish we could stay in our prayer place forever. And sometimes our eyes wander furtively to our rest watches to see how much time we still need to spend in prayer. We nurse a naive fantasy, both about what constitutes prayer and how we might sustain ourselves in it. What often lies at the center of this misguided notion is the belief that prayer is always meant to be interesting, warm, bringing spiritual insight, and giving the sense that we are actually praying. Classical writers in spirituality assures us that, though this is often true during our early prayer lives when we are in the honeymoon stage of our spiritual growth, it becomes less and less true the deeper we advance in prayer and spirituality. But that doesn't mean we are regressing in prayer. It often means the opposite. Another level, false notions of prayer. Why is it so difficult to pray regularly? Some reasons are obvious: busyness, tiredness, and too many demands on our time. But there are other reasons too, suggested by monks and people we think of as mystics. The problem we have in sustaining prayer they say, is often grounded in the false notion that prayer needs to be exciting, intense, and full of energy all the time. That is impossible. Nothing is meant to be excited all the time, including prayer and church services, and nobody has the energy to be alert, attentive, intense, and actively engaged every minute. Like eating, prayer is meant to respect the natural rhythm of our energy. As we know from experience, we don't always want a banquet. If we try to have a banquet every day, we would soon find coming to the table burdensome and would look for every excuse to escape, to sneak off for a quick sandwich by ourselves. Eating has a natural balance. Banquets alternate with quick snacks, rich dishes with simply sandwiches, meals that take a whole evening with meals we eat on the run. We can have high season only if we mostly have ordinary time. Healthy eating habits respect our natural rhythm, our time, energy, tiredness, the season, the hour, our taste. Prayer should be the same, but this isn't generally respected. Too often we are left with the impression that all prayer should be high celebration, upbeat, with high energy. The more variety, the better. Longer is better than shorter. No wonder we often lack the energy to pray and want to avoid church services. The solution is not so much new prayer forms and more variety, but rhythm, routine, and established ritual. For monks, the key to sustain a daily life of prayer is not novelty or the call for a higher energy, but rather a reliance on the expected, the familiar, the repetitions, the ritual. What's needed is a clearly delineated prayer for form that does not demand of you an energy you cannot muster on given every day. There are times, of course, for high celebration, for variety and novelty, for spontaneity and for long ceremonies. There are also times, and these are meant to predominate just as they do in our eating habits. For ordinary time, for low seasons, for prayer that respects our energy level, work pressures and times constraints. It is no accident. I suspect that more people used to attend daily church services when these were shorter, simpler, and less demanding in terms of energy expenditure, and give people attending a clear expectations as to how long they would last. The ritual carry us, our tiredness, our inattentiveness, our indifferences, and even our occasional distaste. They keep us praying even when we are too tired to muster up or our own energy. You're going to stop here, otherwise it's going to be too long, and it's not okay to make a study or a reflection too long, because we need to focus on what we are hearing and how we can bring it to practice. So, my dear ones, prayer, our deepest longing. May this reflection helps you to go through your life, to go through your prayer life. And I believe very strongly that prayer is a lifestyle that walks with you in every situation you are. When you do the dishes, when you do your laundry, when you walk, when you have special intimacy in private time, only facing up in the presence of God, or singing a song, or name it. Prayer happens all the time. even if you're not aware you're praying. But your life can be a prayer to God too. Blessings to all of you, my dear ones. This is your Pastor Yeli. Bye.